Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Gilly Roche is the new work producer for the West Yorkshire Playhouse. She's responsible for the research and development of new projects at the theatre, aiming to offer theatre makers an unpressured environment to develop their work. The Furnacefestival is an annual celebration of the programme, a festival of work by established and up-and-coming artists running every autumn and literally just kicked off as we speak. So thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us at British Theatre Guide. Perhaps you could start just by talking us through this year's Furnacefestival.
Yeah, absolutely. So Venice is our development engine. It's where West Yorkshire Playhouse develops new work, brand new projects, and also local artists. So we kind of work to develop and support the skills and nurture the skills of local artists. That programme runs all year through a programme of scratch nights and also skills workshops, kind of classes, but it manifests every year in the autumn at our fortnight-long Furnacefestival. This year's Furnacefestival, it's just kicked off, 20 minutes ago. And it is, as I say, it's a celebration of that work. So it's 10 shows. We have 10 shows as part of this festival. And it's everything from the very first spark of an idea at scratch, which is a 10-minute kind of incredibly brave exploration and leap into the kind of creative unknown for artists, all the way up to kind of multi-award-winning shows like Rashdash's two-man show, which will be here in Leeds, and big finished kind of co-productions. We've got a co-production called Woke, which is an artist, a world record-holding beatboxer called Testament, and it's a co-production between us, the Roundhouse, the Royal Exchange, and Camden People's Theatre. So it's a really very diverse programme in terms of what you can see. We just want it to kind of be a big celebration.
Yeah, and you developed very strong relationships with these artists who I know, is it Testament, is that his name? Yeah, the hip-hop artist has performed work here before as well, developed work here. Rashdash have a strong working relationship here. So how does that sort of manifest itself with the work you do throughout the year with maybe the more up-and-coming theatre makers and artists?
Yeah, I think the most important thing in my job, and I think probably in everyone's job in this industry, is relationships. It's trust and relationships and building sort of mutually trusting creative relationships with people. And I think that goes for everyone, from somebody who's just out of university, who's just starting out, all the way up to kind of the most kind of garlanded award-winning director. I think you want to have a kind of face-to-face conversation with them and have a cuppa and sort of start to kind of discuss ways that you might be able to work together. And so all of the people who are performing at Scratch Night this evening, who are just doing that very first inquiry, I've had a conversation with. And Andy Brooks, aka Testament, I've been having conversations with for over 2 years about sort of various different projects, and it just continues. And in an ideal world, those conversations continue, the projects continue, new projects might arise, sort of come up on the horizon. But really, it's the same process for everybody, which is just trust and mutual kind of friendship.
And what other ways do you try to encourage those relationships, perhaps between artists as well as artists with the theatre? What kind of offerings does Furnace provide?
So Furnace, as a year-long programme, is underpinned by a thing called the Furnace Social Club. So that's a network. It's a kind of conversation, it's a community, and it's a digital network of local artists. Anyone can sign up. You can have a look on the website and find out how to sign up. And that we sort of send out a regular email. Artists get ticket offers to come and see work in the theatre. We do Furnace Social Club nights, which is everything from a sort of board game night all the way to kind of like wine and cheese night. These are not confirmed. I'm just kind of punting ideas off. Yeah. But that's like the kind of, I think, building a community and strengthening a community, especially your local community, your local creative community, feels important, and possibly more important now than ever, kind of being united and being unified, and having a sort of, I think buildings like this have a responsibility to host that and to hold it and to kind of nurture it.
So I'm just thinking a bit more about this particular festival, this celebration. How have you gone about programming that work? You know, what kind of discussions do you have? Is it your job, you know, solely as the producer of that festival, or is that sort of a collaborative process as well?
Yeah, it is a collaborative process. As much as I'd love to be a dictator, I'm not a dictator. I have kind of conversations all year and beyond about various different projects, and I think because it's a manifestation of a year-long or kind of like a rolling programme, the projects that are kind of shown at Furnacefestival are things that feel ready to kind of go in front of an audience. So particularly with regards to the works in progress that are being shared. So there's 4 different works in progress, and I'm including Scratch within that. Also Joke Translation Service, which is a collaboration between Rachel Mars and our Theatre of Sanctuary, which is a kind of home for sort of refugee and asylum seekers here in Leeds. Trojan Horse, which is by Lung Theatre, which is about Islamic fundamentalisation of secondary schools in Birmingham. The Annex, a reading of a brand new play by a Pontefract-based writer called Olivia Hurst. All of those have been ongoing conversations that feel like they're ready to be put in front of an audience for the first time. And the purpose, the intention of putting them in front of an audience is to ask that audience a question, or a couple of questions. Like, does this make sense? Should this go further? Did you find this bit funny? Did you find this bit boring? And the audience get to kind of feed into that and ultimately feed and inform the next phase of development for all of those projects.
So will that be through sort of kind of formal questionnaires, Q&As afterwards, or is it? I mean, because there must be something also for artists just they can hear if something's funny or not, because they get the audience response.
Yeah, totally. I think that question's a really easy one. Is this funny? Because it's like really easy to know whether something's funny or not. There's 2 ways that we will do it in this year's Furnacefestival. The first is that all the artists will be around. Ultimately, it's a conversation. The artists will all be around. The bar will be open. Like, you can approach an artist and say, like, oh, I really liked your show for this reason. And the other way we do it is a slightly more formalised but still quite playful way, which is we ask all of the artists to pose 2 or 3 questions, succinct questions to the audience. We stick them up on the back wall of the studio, and then in the break or at the end, the audience grab post-it notes and they scribble their feedback or their answers to those specific questions onto the post-it note, and they stick it up on the wall. And by the end, you have this really beautiful visual manifestation of what the whole evening has been about, which is a wall covered in post-it notes of an audience kind of feeding back and responding and informing the next stage in a project's development.
Right. So, and do you know, are these projects that will continue to be developed through the Furnace Festival? I
mean, I hope so. It's really important to allow a project. It might be that a project is shared as a work in progress at Furnacefestival this year, and the artist goes, I don't think it's quite right. Actually, I don't want it to. Maybe it's going to be this. Maybe it's just a conversation that I have with people in my living room, or maybe I want it to be a massive kind of huge thing that goes on to play at the Grand Theatre or in the Quarry. But I think you have to allow for something to fail, and I just did this sort of like inverted commas with my fingers, because I think that word is very complicated, and I think failure should be celebrated. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's all part of the conversation. That's the next part of the conversation.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it ties into what you were saying about it's an unpressured environment. Or you know how this is built. It's that, you know, it's about taking pressure off people to present something as finished.
Exactly.
Full stop.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think perhaps we ought to just clarify a bit how this sort of Furnace as a year-long programme works, and how because we talked a bit about the festival, but I'm very conscious that you've recently been reorganising the way that your newer support and artist development works at the West Yorkshire Playhouse. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So Furnace started in 2011 under my brilliant predecessor, who I know you've spoken to, called Amy Letman, who was associate producer here. And I'd been here for 2.5 years, and I had this I was very privileged to be able to kind of come in and shape and cajole what she did and work with the brilliant team here to kind of create a sort of new structure and a clarified structure of how we support local artists and develop new work. That's all coming to a head on the 23rd of September this year. So Saturday the 23rd, we'll host an event called the Furnace Social Club Nights, the first Furnace Social Club Nights. where our artistic director, James Brining, our associate director, Amy Leach, and our creative engagement director, Alex Ferris, will talk through the programme to local artists and to anyone else who wants to come. But basically, in a nutshell, it is a rolling programme of artist development and new work development. It's our engine room. You can sort of look online and find out more about that, but the sort of artist development section of that is, I think it's incredibly comprehensive. I think one of the things that we have struggled to do over the last couple of years is articulate really clearly what we do, and I think we're getting closer to that now. And I think the benefit of that is that local artists in an ideal world just know exactly how to come into the building, that know that they're welcome, know instantly who to approach, know instantly what they can expect to be able to access, and hopefully that will mean that a greater a more representative group of people and a greater diversity of people will be able to come into the building and get support.
Yeah, great. I was just wondering if how you see it fitting into other models of new work development nationwide and possibly internationally. I don't know, how sort of...
Yeah, I think there are models, like, I think places like the National Theatre Studio are a massive inspiration. I came from the National Theatre of Scotland, also in Glasgow, who, like, both of those massive organisations have very robust and brilliant kind of programmes of development. I also think that, for me personally, the way I run our Scratch is like direct homage to sort of David Jubb and the Battersea Arts Centre. And I just think it's a really useful, when it's done right, I think it's an incredibly useful platform and conversation. We kind of constantly, I think there's two priorities for me. The first is to create a groundswell here in Leeds, to create a reputation and a kind of audience and a programme and a sort of understanding that the Playhouse is somewhere that you can come and we will support you and we will champion your voice, give you a home and sort of nurture your artistic ability, whether that's through our creative engagement activity or through our furnace activity. And that feels incredibly important, supporting the ground around us, the community around us. The second priority is absolutely working in partnership with organisations around the country and around the world.
So you mentioned that you'd been in the role for about two and a half years, is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about your journey to this role? So where you were before, how you've come to this position, and even if there's any advice for budding sort of producers or supporters of new work?
Yes. So as I said, I started, my first job was with the National Theatre of Scotland. That was about 8 years ago in Glasgow. I went to Glasgow Uni, I grew up in Scotland. And that, as a first job, I went in as artistic assistant, and that was artistic assistant to a brilliant woman called Vicky Featherstone. And I also learned from a woman called Frances Poet, who was the literary manager at the time, and Caroline Yule, who is still the director of artistic development. So I had this amazing triumvirate of very incredible women and generous women to learn from. So I was very lucky in that respect. And I think what NTS taught me is the value of a really good story and of sort of championing a diverse range of stories from all perspectives, and what that can do to the soul of a place, to a sort of an identity of a location. And then I worked for a little while as a sort of independent producer, and I set up an artist development programme called Team Effort in Glasgow, which was sort of super under the radar. It was funded by Creative Scotland, and it was in an artist studio in Glasgow. And there was something. For me, there was something about bringing together that project. Basically, what it did was bring together musicians, visual artists, and theatre makers who were at sort of pivotal moments in their careers, and it gave them a year of playtime. So a bit of money, a pot of money to go and see stuff or to travel internationally, and kind of just focus on what it was in their practice that they needed to hone in order to take the next leap. So, for example, one of the people who was in that group was a playwright called Steph Smith, who'd sort of spent a long time going down to London and just visiting the Royal Court, visiting the National, visiting the places, and seeing just absolutely wonderful new writing that sort of just made her craft just kind of sort of reach a different platform. So that was really brilliant. So I did Team Effort, and then I saw the job here, and I think Leeds, for me, it sort of feels like no mistake that I'm in Leeds after Glasgow. They're both cities that kind of celebrate, as I say, have a really generous storytelling history. They really, really love a good story, and they both sort of approach theatre like it's a conversation between what's happening on stage and what's in the audience. And that feels really important and really exciting to me. It's generous storytelling.
And maybe as sort of a final question, you must see a lot of new work. You see a lot of people coming here, you get a lot of people coming here. Is there anything you've noticed recently in terms of trends or sort of a underlying kind of feel of the new work that's being created, really at that sort of grassroots level, so that sort of earliest work in progress?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of trends, thematic trends, I think it's not necessarily just at the sort of work in progress level. I think over the last year there has been a drive by artists to respond to the times, to respond to what's happening in the world. We have a really brilliant associate artist, a woman called Pauline Mayers, whose show What If I Told You we have supported, and it's kind of ongoing, it's touring. There's a quote by Nina Simone in that piece, which is an artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. And I think, therefore, a producer's responsibility is to support those artists to do that. And I think the biggest thematic thing, like, I was at the Edinburgh Festival this year, and it was the work that I was seeing was stunning, and sort of felt like it was a really necessary thing for me as a human being within the world, as well as a sort of new work producer. And it shows like Selena Thompson's Salt, Nina, Josette Bushell-Bingo's Nina Simone show, What If I Told You? Just these big, relevant, prescient, urgent pieces of theatre. And I think that's what we've tried to do with furnacefestival as well. These stories contained within this programme are genuinely from as diverse a perspective as possible. So you have Kate O'Donnell, the wonderful You've Changed, a story of a woman transitioning. You have Woke, a story of a man, an artist of colour, who becomes a father and kind of realises that possibly his hip-hop background doesn't marry with feminism. You have two-man show, this just absolutely stunning deconstruction of the patriarchy, as all the way down to, like, as I said, joke translation service, Rachel Mars working with refugee and asylum seekers from Leeds to tell jokes and to deconstruct them and to create a kind of safe space where we can all just be human beings. And so that feels like it's a total privilege for me to have had something to do with that, the programming of that festival. But I feel more than anything from this, I feel so proud and in awe of those artists who are making statements in this political climate that feel, I use the word audacious in a lot of the print, and the word audacious for me, like, there are a lot of buzzwords that people like me use, like bold and brave and all of these things, and they are bold and brave, and that is true, but audacious, and that is rude and impudent, and not accepting the sort of traditional sort of like norms. They're being impudent, and that feels more important now than ever. And so as a theme, I think that's it.
Audaciousness.
Audaciousness.
I don't know
exactly.
what the word is. Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.